Okay, so you've taken the time to reflect on this past year and really, kind of mine out the lessons that you learned and the experiences that you had, and you've created a good summary of what's behind you so that we can step with confidence into what's in front of us. It's common at the new year for everybody to make New Year's resolutions. And I think the top 5 New Year's resolutions that usually, surface around the top is, saving money, exercising more, paying off debt, losing weight, spending more time with family. These things that people are like, okay, this is what I'm going to knuckle down now. I'm really going to do this. And what we're told is that, that when people set out to do this, usually within, the first few weeks, they're doing pretty good. It's like the first 2-3 weeks, the numbers are pretty high. Those that make New Year's resolutions, like 100% are engaged. Come February, drops down to about 75%, which isn't awful. But when you look at where folks are at the end of the year, it's usually around 5% of people who made New Year's resolutions are actually seeing those New Year's resolutions play out. And a lot of that is because, unfortunately, New Year's resolutions just really don't grab a hold of us in a sustainable way to see long-term change. And oftentimes they don't work because they're either too vague or too shallow, or we take on too many, or there's a combination of all of that going on. What I'm going to introduce to you through this is this idea of picking one word, that you can focus on over the course of the coming year. Just one word. So that's not vague. It's not going to be shallow, and certainly not too many. We're just going to focus on one. So several years ago, I noticed that about a third to halfway through the year, there would sort of be like a theme I would find in my life that was sort of rising to the surface. So for example, I remember I got this curiosity about people who had changed their industry or who had started an industry. And so I began to sort of dive into a lot of biographies about these folks because I was curious about people that were curious or people that were change agents. And I noticed as I began to think about that, I began to notice that every year I sort of fell into this word, but I was in a very reactive posture. And it was several years ago now that I was attending, my family, we were attending a church called Port City Community Church in North Carolina. And the pastor there, Pastor Mike Ashcraft, laid out this vision for picking this one word. In fact, he wrote a book on it called My One Word. I would encourage you to go check it out because a lot of the stuff I'm going to share here, I've actually kind of gleaned from him. And the idea is this, what I found was I kind of fell into sort of a word, and what he laid out was there's actually a way to discover a word at the beginning of the year, that there's a focal point that you can have in your life that God may want to use to bring a focus to your life that you haven't had before. And so we began to step into that. And so at the end of every year, beginning of the year, we would kind of do this, go through this process individually and as a family, where we would figure out what our word was going to be for the year. You see, New Year's resolutions are fine. So I'm not telling you not to do them. They can be good. But when you focus on a character trait or you focus on one thing, man, that's way better. So for example, I may say, I'm going to be more punctual, right? I'm going to be more disciplined with my time. And so I'm going to get a calendar and a day planner, and I'm going to get everything mapped out. Okay, that's all great, but what's underneath that? Why am I not punctual? Why am I not organized with my time? What are the character traits that are lacking or that need to mature that are underneath all of that? So it's about pressing into that deeper layer that if you press into that, it'll percolate up to the top, right? And the change will be natural. So this is a shift in focus, a shift from behavior change, which many of us are conditioned to sort of adopt. So a shift from behavior change to a shift in focus on the person I need to be, the person I want to be, the person others need me to be. What could that look like? Well, If you have your PDF, you're going to notice that there's a handful of questions that I lay out here. So one is, the first question is this: who do you admire, right? So think of this as brainstorming. So you're going to kind of start real general, and we're going to get specific as we go through these questions. So who do you admire? What family members, mentors, coaches, ministers, friends, historical figures? I mean, you come up with more categories, I imagine. Who do you admire? And then what are the attributes and character traits do you see in them? So maybe you admire your brother. So you could list that out, like my brother, and then here's the character traits I see in my brother, or here's a coworker, or here's a neighbor, or, you know, a friend, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, kind of highlight a person, and then, okay, what are the character traits that I see within them? So who do I admire? And then why do I admire them? So what common traits do so if I lay this out, let's say I got 6 different folks laid out, what are some common traits that I begin to see sort of rising to the surface between all of these folks? And then why do I admire those traits specifically? And if I could copy those over from each one of them, what would it be? What would be just some of those traits that I would pull over? So you're kind of starting general, and we're working our way down to kind of hone through this process. And this can take a while, right? So again, this is about finding that place where it's distraction free. You can have some creative thinking. If you're like me, I like to play some music in the background, have a really good cup of coffee as I think about these things. So, you know, it's about just kind of mulling this stuff over in your mind. You know, so what are those common traits? Why do I admire those traits? You know, if I could copy any of those over to myself, what would they be? And then what can I learn from these traits? So, you know, with these traits in mind, think about this question. What kind of person do I hope to be? So as I look at these traits, what kind of person do I hope to be at the end of this year? So look over the traits, right? And work out an answer to that question. What kind of person do I want to be at the end of this year? Again, this is a shift away from behavior change to character change, to who I am, not just what I do, but who I am. So what kind of person do I want to be at the end of this year? And so as you mull this over, what you'll find is you'll find some themes beginning to rise. You'll find some things beginning to highlight that will help you sort of know how to step forward into all of this. Because as this happens, it's sort of like a filtration process, you're gonna find that there's some themes that then point to specific words, and you're gonna see that there's like maybe just a handful of words that you keep coming back to. What are those words? Why do you think they're grabbing your attention? And then as you look at those, you know, highlight maybe just those 3 or 4 or 5 words, highlight those, and then start looking up their meanings. You know, get out the dictionary or jump on Google, get out a thesaurus, do some, you can do some etymology research, which I think is, for this kind of exercise, is interesting. Where did this word come from? What influenced it? And then what does this say about the type of person I want to become? Because there's an opportunity here for you to not be in the same place this time next year. There's an opportunity for you to grow, but it's going to require focus. It's not just going to happen. You're going to have to be intentional, and you can be. You can be intentional about taking these sort of steps, but having a really narrow focal point, a very clear target of what you're going to hit, will help in spades, will kind of help inform a lot of the decisions you're going to need to make in life to light up that path. So as you do this, you're going to find like a word kind of rise to the surface. And so that's this discovery process. You know, I firmly believe this is not about having to manufacture anything. I think the Lord has a word for you, a word that you can focus on. What is that? What could He be wanting to bring your attention to, so that you can zoom in on that and go, okay, yeah, that's what I need to be focused on this year. Now, you might find yourself, this is one of the things I found, you might find yourself focusing on a word that you're like, I don't want to focus on that. That sounds hard. That's confusing. That's weird. I don't want to be that, but you find yourself keep going back to it. Press into that. Okay? So again, if part 2 is about reflecting on the past, this is about discovering what's the word, your one word, that you can carry this year as you step forward into what God has for you.